It was another busy afternoon at the small-town diner, the air filled with the sounds of sizzling pans and the low hum of chatter between customers. The waitress, Sarah, moved quickly between the tables, refilling coffee cups and delivering plates of pancakes and burgers. She had worked here for years, and she knew the regulars well. But today, something felt different. The atmosphere seemed charged, as if something unexpected was about to happen. As Sarah wiped down a table near the window, her eyes caught sight of a young boy standing outside the diner. He was looking at the door, almost as if he was deciding whether or not to enter. The boy looked to be no older than 12, with shaggy brown hair falling into his eyes and clothes that seemed too large for him. His face was pale, and his shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world was on them. He stood there for a moment, taking in the busy scene inside, before he finally pushed the door open and stepped in. Sarah had seen many faces come through the diner's door, but there was something about this boy that stood out. He was different from the usual customers. No bright smile, no confident stride. He looked lost, uncertain, almost invisible. Sarah's heart softened as she watched him move past the other tables, trying to find a seat. His eyes scanned the room, but he didn't make eye contact with anyone. He seemed to be trying his best to blend in, hoping no one would notice him. After a moment of hesitation, he chose a booth by the window, sitting down quietly. He didn't order anything, just stared out the window, his hands folded tightly in front of him. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for the boy. He looked like he was carrying some kind of burden, something heavy that he couldn't shake off. The thought of him sitting there alone, in this busy place, made Sarah's heart ache. She paused for a moment, watching him from across the room. She could see the faint signs of hunger on his face, the way he kept glancing at the food being served to other tables, the way his stomach seemed to growl in the quiet moments. Sarah knew that look. She had seen it before. It was the look of someone who had gone too long without a proper meal. She couldn't stand the thought of this boy sitting here hungry, ignored by the world around him. Without a second thought, Sarah walked over to his table, her footsteps soft on the diner's wooden floor. As she approached, she smiled gently, trying to make the boy feel at ease. He looked up, startled, but quickly lowered his eyes again. Sarah could see the hesitation in his expression. He seemed unsure if he should speak, as if he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Hi there," Sarah said kindly. "I'm Sarah. Can I get you something to eat?" The boy looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of shyness and wariness. He didn't say anything at first, just looked down at the table. Sarah could feel his discomfort, but she didn't push him. She waited patiently, giving him time to decide. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the boy nodded. I don't have any money," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's heart sank. She had heard this before, many times, from people who were down on their luck. But this time, it was different. This boy wasn't asking for charity. He wasn't asking for anything at all. He just seemed to be waiting for someone to see him, to acknowledge that he existed. "That's okay," Sarah said with a warm smile. "I'll take care of it. What would you like to eat?" The boy blinked in surprise. He looked at her, as if he couldn't believe what she had said. "Really?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, really. You don't have to worry about paying. Just tell me what you'd like." The boy hesitated for a moment, then nodded again. I'd like a bowl of soup, if that's okay." Sarah's smile grew even warmer. "Of course. I'll get that for you right away." As Sarah turned to walk to the kitchen, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of connection to this boy. There was something about him, something that made her want to help him. Maybe it was the look of loneliness in his eyes, or maybe it was the fact that he seemed so out of place in this world full of noise and distraction. Whatever it was, Sarah knew she couldn't just let him sit there, unnoticed and hungry. She had to do something, even if it was just for this one moment. As she returned with the bowl of soup, she placed it gently in front of him. The boy looked up at her, a small flicker of gratitude in his eyes. He didn't say anything, but his hand reached for the spoon, and he began to eat. Sarah watched him for a moment, her heart full. She was glad she had made the choice to help him. It felt like the right thing to do, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this small act of kindness would lead to something more, something unexpected, something life-changing. As the boy ate in silence, Sarah stood at the counter, looking over at him. She wondered who he was, where he had come from, and why he was alone. But one thing was clear. He had found a moment of peace here, in this small diner, where the world seemed to slow down just for him. But little did Sarah know, this simple act of kindness would lead to a revelation that would change her life forever. As the minutes passed, Sarah continued to watch the boy from behind the counter. She couldn't help but feel a strange connection to him, though she barely knew anything about his life. The diner's chatter faded into the background as she stole glances at the boy eating quietly at his booth. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the spoon to his mouth, and she noticed how carefully he took each bite, as if savoring every morsel, as if he hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. It was hard to imagine someone so young living in such hardship. Sarah felt a deep pang of sadness for him. She didn't know why he was alone, what had brought him to this point, but she had a sense that there was more to his story than met the eye. She wanted to help him, to know his story, but she knew it wasn't her place to ask too many questions. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about this boy that was different, something she couldn't quite put into words. Her thoughts were interrupted when the boy looked up, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since he had arrived. There was something in his gaze, something that caught her off guard. It wasn't the usual look of gratitude she received from customers when they enjoyed a meal. It was a look of uncertainty, as if he was afraid to trust anyone. He quickly looked back down at his bowl, almost embarrassed to have been caught staring. Sarah smiled softly, trying to reassure him. She walked over to his table, her footsteps light, not wanting to startle him. "How is the soup?" she asked, keeping her voice gentle, as though she didn't want to intrude on his quiet moment. The boy glanced up again, but this time his gaze seemed a little less guarded. "It's good," he said, his voice barely audible. He paused, and then added, "Thank you for giving it to me." Sarah nodded. "You're very welcome," she replied, her heart warming at the boy's words. She could see that he was trying to show some kind of appreciation, but there was a hesitance to his actions, as though he wasn't used to kindness. The silence between them lingered, and Sarah felt a growing curiosity about the boy. She wanted to ask him more about his life, but she knew she had to tread carefully. It wasn't her place to pry into his past, but she couldn't help herself. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, not sure if she should have spoken those words aloud. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but if you ever need someone to talk to." The boy seemed to hesitate, his eyes flickering with emotions he didn't know how to express. For a moment, it looked like he might say something, but then he just shook his head. "I'm fine," he mumbled, almost too quietly for Sarah to hear. I don't have anywhere else to go." Sarah's heart clenched at his words. "You're always welcome here," she said, hoping her words offered him some comfort, even if it was just for a moment. She wanted him to know that there was kindness here, in this small diner, and that he wasn't alone. The boy didn't respond. He just ate his soup in silence, occasionally glancing up at Sarah, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. She wondered if he knew what it felt like to truly belong somewhere, to have a place where he could just be himself. Maybe that was why he seemed so guarded, so distant. Perhaps he had been hurt before, and now he found it hard to trust anyone. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to push aside the wave of empathy she felt for the boy. She knew she couldn't fix his problems, but she could offer him this small moment of kindness. And sometimes, that was all a person needed to feel a little bit of hope. As Sarah walked away, she continued to steal glances at the boy. He was eating slowly, savoring each bite, as if he wasn't sure when he would have another meal. It made Sarah's heart ache, but she knew that there was only so much she could do. She couldn't take him home, She couldn't solve all of his problems, but at least for today, she had offered him something small. A meal, a warm place to sit, and the reminder that there were people who cared. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the arrival of a new customer. Sarah quickly turned to greet them, but her thoughts were still with the boy. She knew he wouldn't be around forever. At some point, he would have to leave, and the world outside the diner would continue on. But for now, in this quiet corner of the diner, he had found a brief moment of peace, and Sarah was content with that. The boy finished his meal in silence, his hands now resting on the table. When he was done, he slowly stood up, his eyes searching the diner one last time. He glanced at Sarah, who was busy with another customer, and for a brief moment, their eyes met again. This time, there was something more in his gaze, a flicker of recognition, as if he was silently thanking her for the kindness she had shown him. Without saying a word, the boy left the diner, slipping out the door as quietly as he had entered. Sarah watched him go, her heart heavy with unanswered questions. Who was he? Where did he come from? And why had he chosen her diner? But as the boy disappeared into the distance, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had helped him, even if only for a moment. And sometimes, that was enough. Little did Sarah know, the boy's story was far from over. The next time their paths crossed, things would be very different, and the mystery of who he truly was would be revealed in the most unexpected way. The next morning, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the boy. His face, his sad eyes, and the way he ate that soup as if it were the last meal he'd ever have, had all lingered in her mind. She found herself replaying the short conversation they'd had over and over again, wondering who he really was and why he was out there alone. She had tried to dismiss it, telling herself that she had done what she could by offering him food and kindness, but the boy's story didn't feel complete. Something told her there was more to him than he had let on, and she couldn't shake that nagging feeling. As Sarah opened the diner for another busy day, she went through her usual morning routine. She wiped down the tables, brewed the coffee, and checked the orders, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the boy. She knew she had to get back to work, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that there was a bigger picture she wasn't seeing. Just as Sarah was about to grab her apron, the phone at the counter rang, its shrill tone breaking the silence of the diner. She picked it up, expecting it to be another order. But the voice on the other end was not a familiar one. "Hello, is this Sarah?" the voice asked. It was a deep, smooth voice, with an air of authority that immediately caught Sarah's attention. "Yes, this is Sarah," she replied, a hint of confusion creeping into her voice. "Who's this?" "This is Laura. I'm with the Emerson family. You may not know me, but I'm calling about a boy who was in your diner yesterday." The voice paused for a moment, as if waiting for Sarah to react. "His name is Luke Emerson." The name hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Luke Emerson. She had heard of the Emerson family before. They were one of the wealthiest families in the state, known for their vast estate and successful business empire. The thought that the boy she had served soup to was linked to such a well-known family shocked her. She couldn't believe it. "Luke Emerson," Sarah repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "You mean the boy who came into the diner yesterday?" "Yes," Laura replied, her tone serious. "He's missing. He's been missing for years now. We've been searching for him, but he's been hiding. You see, he's the only heir to the Emerson fortune, and he ran away from home when he was just a child." Sarah felt a wave of shock wash over her. She had no idea that the boy, who seemed so lost and alone, was the missing heir to a fortune she had only heard about in the news. Her mind raced as she tried to piece everything together. Why had Luke left? Why had he chosen to be alone, without anyone by his side? Laura continued, "We've been looking for him everywhere, but he's been hiding, living off the grid. We had no idea where he had gone, and we thought we might never find him. But then we heard that he had been spotted at your diner. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? We need to bring him back." Sarah stood there, speechless. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but everything felt like it was happening too fast. I didn't know," she finally managed to say. "I didn't know who he was. He just came in yesterday, and I gave him some soup. He didn't say much, but he looked like he needed help. He seemed so out of place. I had no idea he was from such a wealthy family." Laura's voice softened. "We had no idea where he was all these years, but it seems like he's been surviving on his own, living as if he didn't want anyone to know who he was. I'm sure he's been struggling with something we don't understand." Sarah's heart ached as she listened to Laura's words. She couldn't imagine what Luke had been through to make him run away from the life he had, a life of wealth and privilege. What could possibly be so bad that he had chosen to live alone in the streets, away from his family, away from the comforts most people would dream of? I can't help you find him," Sarah said, still trying to absorb the weight of the situation. "He left before I could say anything else. I don't even know where he went." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I understand," Laura said quietly. "But if you hear from him again, if he comes back to your diner, please let us know. We just want him to come home. He's been lost for far too long." After a few more pleasantries, the call ended. Sarah stood in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. Luke Emerson, the boy she had fed the soup to, the boy who had looked so lost and alone, was the missing heir to one of the wealthiest families in the state. She had no idea why he had run away or why he had chosen her diner as the place to seek refuge, but the truth was undeniable. As she looked around the diner, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Luke. What kind of life had he been living all these years? Why had he run away? Was he still out there, hiding somewhere? Or had he left town for good? The diner felt quieter now, even though it was still filled with customers. Everything seemed different. Sarah realized that, despite what she knew about Luke now, the boy she had met yesterday was still just that, a boy in need of kindness, someone who had come to her without asking for anything but a meal. She hoped that somehow, despite everything, Luke would find his way back to the life he had run away from, back to the family that was desperately searching for him. And maybe, just maybe, he would find the peace he had been seeking all these years. But for now, all Sarah could do was wait for the boy to return, and wait for the truth of his story to unfold. It had been a few days since Sarah had received that unexpected call from the Emerson family. The revelation about Luke had shaken her, but it also left her with a lingering sense of uncertainty. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy who had wandered into her diner, hungry and alone, with nothing but the kindness of strangers to keep him going. She often wondered what had happened to him after he left the diner that day, whether he was safe, or if he was still out there, hiding somewhere, trying to escape a past that was chasing him. Sarah had tried to move on with her life, focusing on her work and keeping the diner running smoothly, but a part of her couldn't let go of Luke's story. She had hoped, even prayed, that he would return, if only for a brief moment. She wanted to know what happened to him, to understand why he had chosen the path he did, and most importantly, she wanted to help him if she could. One afternoon, as Sarah was refilling a coffee pot at the counter, the bell above the door jingled, signaling that someone had entered the diner. She didn't pay much attention at first, as she was busy with an order, but then she heard the sound of footsteps coming closer. Sarah turned around to greet the new customer, expecting to see another regular, but when her eyes landed on the figure standing at the door, her heart stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was Luke. He was wearing the same ragged clothes as before, but there was something different about him now. He wasn't the same shy, withdrawn boy who had entered her diner days ago. This time, there was a quiet confidence in his stance, a sense of determination that Sarah hadn't seen before. He was still the same boy, but now he seemed changed, somehow. Luke's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, neither of them moved. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, her mind struggling to process what was happening. She had never expected to see him again, let alone walk through that door like this. But here he was, standing in front of her. "Luke," Sarah said softly, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't sure if it was because of the shock of seeing him or because of the overwhelming emotions that had been building up inside her. Luke nodded, but he didn't say anything at first. Instead, he looked around the diner, as if taking in the familiar surroundings, before his gaze returned to Sarah. I came back," he said quietly, his voice still tinged with uncertainty. "I didn't know where else to go." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She didn't know what to say, but she stepped forward, her hands instinctively reaching out as if to offer him some comfort. "You're welcome here, Luke," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're always welcome." Luke's eyes softened, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of hope in them. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, his words carefully chosen, "about what you said. When you helped me, you told me I was welcome here, no matter what. And I didn't really understand that at first. But now I do." Sarah waited, giving him the space he needed to speak, to explain himself. She had no idea what he was about to say, but she knew that this moment was significant. It was a turning point, not just for Luke, but for her as well. I've been running away from a lot of things," Luke continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "From my family, from the life I was supposed to have. I thought I didn't need anyone, that I could make it on my own. But now I realize that I was wrong. I don't have to do this alone." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, her heart swelling with pride for this boy who had been so lost, so uncertain, but had found the courage to face the truth. "Luke," she said softly, "you don't have to do it alone. Not anymore. You've already shown me so much strength by coming back here. You've taken the first step, and I'm proud of you." Luke nodded slowly, his eyes filling with unshed tears. "I'm sorry for disappearing, for making everyone worry. But I was scared. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know if I could fit back into that life, that world." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart aching for the boy who had struggled so much. "You don't have to fit into any world, Luke. You just have to be you. That's all anyone needs." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the diner, the clatter of dishes, the quiet hum of conversation, seemed to fade into the background as Sarah and Luke stood there, connected in a way that only people who had shared a difficult journey could understand. Finally, Luke spoke again, this time with a soft, genuine smile on his face. "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I wasn't sure I deserved it." Sarah smiled back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "There's nothing to thank me for, Luke. I'm just glad you're here, and I'm glad you're home." Luke hesitated for a moment before taking a deep breath, and adding, "I'm going back to my family. I think it's time. But before I go, I wanted to tell you something. You were right. It's not about money or fame or success. It's about love and kindness and being there for each other." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest as she heard Luke's words. She had always believed that kindness had the power to change lives, but seeing it in action, hearing it from this boy who had been through so much, made it all the more meaningful. "I'll never forget what you did for me," Luke said softly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I won't be alone anymore." With that, Luke turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway, her heart full. She watched him go, knowing that this was just the beginning of his journey, and the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. And as Sarah stood there, watching the boy she had helped walk away toward his future, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from solving all of life's problems, but the kind that came from knowing that one small act of kindness had the power to change everything. Luke was no longer lost, and neither was she.